Hey guys, this is Coach Eric here with Coach Luke. We are going to give a little, first of all, we're just finishing up the last week of our CrossFit Open. We're going to give you a brief overview today of what the rest of the year is going to look like. Every year it looks a little bit different, but general gist of kind of what our program is going to look like is it'll be broken down in a couple cycles. Luke's going to explain what kind of what a macrocycle is, what a microcycle is, and what a mesocycle is. How that applies to what we're doing in CrossFit, and what the year is going to look like. So, yeah.
Cool, guys. So, I guess the first thing that I should explain is that with what we write up for the programming for CrossFit Reason, we use what we call a macrocycle. And if you guys don't know what a macrocycle is, it's essentially a blueprint of a whole year's worth of programming with a goal or intention in mind. And so when we look at the blueprint of the year of programming, if say you're training for the Open, then your macrocycle will be specific towards getting you to be the fittest you can be for the Open right around March or February. So that's going to be around the timeline that we're going to be talking about today's, we're going to be talking about the programming. So a macrocycle is kind of like a 1 year long blueprint of how it's going to work. And there are specific and methodical kind of like paths or blocks in which the macrocycle is divided into called mesocycles. And those mesocycles, ranging from 1 to 3 months, are going to get us closer and closer to the state that we want to be in, or the fitness state that we want to be in by the time the Open comes around, or by the time our end goal comes around. So, and then the last thing that you guys should know is what a microcycle is. And a microcycle is essentially a either 1 to 2 week long period, so a smaller version of a mesocycle that kind of gives us a good idea or is a good representation of what our goal and intention is in mind for the mesocycle and the macrocycle all in one. So going over the end of the Open, we are finishing that up this week. Coming into next week, March 26th and 31st, okay? This is going to be our testing week, all right? So if you're someone who is, say, training for the Open, this is gonna differ than someone who is training for your general fitness. We've now released 2 separate tracks. If you are someone who has committed or has said out loud that I want to train to be as fit as I can for the Open, then you're gonna follow a specific or slightly more different track than the people who are just training for your general fitness in your day-to-day classes. So when you come in here, there's gonna be still the same workout, just different standards that you need to uphold. And if you are following the fitness track, it's gonna be a little bit more general and scalable through there.
The major difference between Open programming, so people that have said I want to do the Open, you know, and people that are here for fitness, I don't say that are just here for fitness, but you know, fitness is your primary goal. You're here because you want to get in better shape, to be a better parent, to be a better, fitter person for your job. The 99%, you know, I'd say, you know, 5% or less of our gym is actually training for the Open. Everybody else is just here for fitness, and that's a fantastic goal. That's happy to have you here for that, and we definitely will address that. As far as cycling goes, when we look at our programming for the gym, our microcycle. If you're training for the Open, your week-to-week training you'll follow alpha as well, and that's going to help you get a more balanced programming in terms of microcycles. So on a week-to-week basis, your programming is going to look really, really balanced for your general fitness. You're still going to get really, really general balanced programming if you follow if you don't do the alpha work. If your goal is just GPP, but that's going to look like fitness in terms of a mesocycle. Okay, so that's kind of where it differs on a 1 to 2 week basis, as opposed to like a month view, or 1 to 2 month, or a 3 month view. Okay.
So March 26th to 31st, we're doing our testing week. Something you guys should know is that while we're going through this testing week, it's really vital and important that you guys are just focusing on the tests given at hand. So for especially you guys, you open athletes, I would suggest that you guys stick to just this training session every single day. Try not to do any accessory work on top of that, or I know you guys love to stick around and work on extra stuff and work on your weaknesses, and I love that and I'm all for that, but I would say that just for this specific week, if your goal is to try to figure out how you can get as fit as you can coming up next year, realizing what your weaknesses are after this year's open, we really want to focus and we really want to be as fresh as we can coming into each of these tests. So each of these tests, we have a back squat test, we have an overhead complex test, we have a 3 baseline conditioning piece that include monostructural and gymnastics, and then we have Olympic lifting and then an overhead pressing kind of piece to kind of test on.
Yeah, to kind of echo what Luke is saying about not doing extra stuff during this week, I compare it to your annual visit to your doctor. This is your annual visit. Maybe you do it quarterly, that's fine. We do tests relatively frequently, like I say, at least quarterly. But this is our big test of the year. It's right after the open. We will test again in a few cycles, but this is like getting your blood work done. So it's just like your doctor says, you know, have a fasting glucose level, don't eat breakfast the day before. It's the same thing. Hit your programming that day of, go home, go to sleep, don't do anything else. Recover as much as possible and test again the next day. We don't want you to eat again before your before your testing.
Yeah.
The mesocycle that we're headed towards is April, May, and June. Immediately following this next week, after testing, we are going to go into a cycle of back squat and front squat. We're either going to be squatting on Mondays and Tuesdays, and if you're doing alpha, Wednesdays and Thursdays in addition. If you follow, if you've ever done like a Hatch cycle by Coach Gail Hatch, probably most of you have not. It's a similar cycle to what he does for his weightlifters. It's a great way to get relative and absolute strength in 12 weeks. It also happens to fit our 12-week cycle for the next 3 months. Our focus is on absolute strength, getting good positioning in those in the bottom of your squat, and just developing your overall body, your strength. So if you gain muscle during this time, it's a great time to gain muscle. If your goal is just to get stronger and not change your body composition at all, it's also a great time to do that. In addition to that, we're still going to be like, that doesn't mean that we're cutting our conditioning pieces and we're only focusing on strength, but certain days we might just be a little bit more focused on strength. Certain days when we're focused on conditioning, certain days are going to be mixed. You guys aren't going to notice much of a difference, but the emphasis that you'll see is that there's going to be a lot more emphasis on recovering between your sets. As far as our July, August, September goes, it's going to be a similar focus on strength, but kind of more posterior chain dominant, and also picking up a little more gymnastics during that time. Our last cycle, as we get into October, November, December, it's going to look like what we did this past year. It's going to be barbell cycling and positioning of weightlifting positioning, and a little bit of gymnastics as well. As far as our alpha programming, Luke's going to kind of talk about what alpha programming looks like, the reason why we do it, and the things that we're going to be emphasizing in alpha. So to reiterate what alpha is to kind of balance out the programming. The idea is that you do that in addition to the hour a day. So if you come in and you can either do that in the morning session and come back and do regular class, or you can do class and then come back and do alpha session. We ask that you do the class in addition to alpha. It is to balance out. It should not be replacing it.
So if you are doing alpha, we have 4 kind of main intents, or 4 kind of main goals that we're gonna be approaching it with. Number 1 is, just as Eric just kind of talked about, but I'm going to reiterate, is the balancing aspect. So as someone who's doing alpha, when you're doing the alpha programming, you'll notice that the movements that we do in alpha, or the types of workouts, whether it's an AMRAP or something for time, or even just accessory work, it's just work to be able to balance out your week. As someone who is trying to be an athlete in the open, you want to be able to be as inclusive as possible within each microcycle. So when we talked about microcycles earlier, we know that a microcycle lasts for 1 to 2 weeks. We want to fit in as much as we can in that 1 to 2 weeks, so that we can get as most adapted as possible to those certain movements in those specific types of workouts, so that we can kind of progress from there. So that's kind of the balancing aspect. What I want to kind of talk about volume in terms of alpha is we're adding on volume, or we're adding on more work essentially into your training session days. And so what this gets us to do is it helps us adapt to be able to perform not only more, but I'd say at better or more desired intensities when you compete, when you do your sport or whatever it is. It's just a better way to be able to kind of move into a more athlete path versus a just general fitness path. We have talked about our weaknesses in alpha. Because we are balancing things out, you'll notice that day to day there will be things in alpha that are demanded of you that will kind of expose some weaknesses. And I think that's the point of alpha, really, is to just figure out what you're good at, what you're bad at. And on those days when you see something that comes up on alpha that you realize like, oh wow, like I may not be as good at rope climbs as I thought I was, or I may not be as good as pull-ups as I thought I was. The programming is designed for you to be able to meet certain standards at some point. And so we want you to be able to do, for example, 15 pull-ups in a row, or 30 burpees in under a minute at some point. And so we want you to be able to reach those things, and you'll realize that there are some weaknesses. Don't worry if you feel like you're not reaching a certain standard. Just by you doing alpha helps you reach your goal, or helps you progress into becoming more competitive. And the last part is our gymnastics accessory. We've noticed that a lot of our athletes really want to know how to progress into getting pull-ups, into getting chest bar pull-ups, or even a muscle up and handstand push-ups as well. Those are all things that will be included and will help us get into get stronger gymnastics in terms of how our midline takes a huge role in muscle ups, toes to bar, handstand push-ups, etc. So that's alpha kind of in a nutshell.
Cool. One last thing before we kind of wrap up is during our testing week, we are testing heavy maxes. If you are a newer athlete, that's anybody that's can range from 3 to 6 months or younger in our program. Instead of 1 rep maxes, I'm going to ask that you guys test for a 2 to 3 rep max. Okay. If you feel very, very comfortable, like you've trained elsewhere, or you've just picked up really, really quickly, and you're like, hey, I want to go for that 1 rep max, definitely do go for it. Just make sure that you have some coaches watching, and you definitely have some spotters. When we go for our 1 rep maxes, a lot of times we will be failing and there will be dumping, which is what we want to see as we start getting close to that 100%, 105%, 99%, whatever percentage that you're going to get close to hitting. That's what we're gonna go, and then that's okay. If you don't match your PR or whatever for this testing next week, that's fine. That's what we're gonna be working with for the next few weeks. As far as getting into our our cycle for the next 12 weeks, what I want to see with our squatting is we're gonna apply a couple new rules. Not because of sound. I know we get a lot of sound complaints or noise complaints, but because we want you to get the most out of your squat possible. There will be no dumping of your squat when we're hitting these percentages. When I say that, that means, yeah, there will be days that we're human, right? Like some days I don't get enough sleep, some days I didn't eat enough, some days I ate too much, or I had a long day and I'm just not feeling it. I come in the next day and I'm just not feeling good, or I had a long day at work and I'm not feeling good to work out, but I'm still here anyway. The important thing is that you're here to do the work. On those days that you're starting to miss your numbers early on, what I recommend that you do is you drop your set for that set by 2 to 5%, 2.5 to 5%, and then try to hit the weights anyway. And you're gonna stay on, everything's gonna be based off of our testing this week and you need to do all of your numbers based off of the testing. Also, we're gonna focus on using spotters. So on your squats, if you feel like it's really, really heavy, do control the eccentric coming down. That's the bottoming out portion of your squat. On the way up, if you need a spotter, we're gonna use spotters to get back up, okay? That should be on your last few reps. If it's a set of 5, you should maybe use that on 4 and 5, and know that on your next set, you're gonna drop your set by 2 to 5%, okay? But we want you to fight through it instead of bailing. That's how you get stronger. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask myself or any of our coaches, I do the programming for our gym. Luke helps out, especially he's going to be doing some of our later cycles this year. But the early cycle, this next 12 weeks, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We want you to know what we're doing. We want you to be educated on it, and we want you to be passionate and excited about what we're doing. The more excited you guys are, the more committed you're going to be, the better results you're going to get. All right? See you guys at the gym.
Peace.